George "Machine Gun" Kelly Barnes did not begin life as a legend. He was born in 1895 in Memphis, Tennessee, far from the spotlight that would later chase him. Like many young men of his era, he struggled to find a steady path. The 1920s and 1930s were restless decades. Prohibition had created a shadow economy of bootleggers and criminals, while the Great Depression left millions desperate for opportunities that seemed forever out of reach. Outlaws rose to fame as both villains and folk heroes. Names like John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, and Babyface Nelson became infamous. In that same world, George Barnes would stumble into notoriety, but his rise was less about skill and more about image, myth, and a single disastrous choice. Kelly's nickname, Machine Gun, carried weight. It conjured up visions of a ruthless man spraying bullets from a Thompson submachine gun, but in truth, it was more branding than reality. Catherine Kelly, his ambitious wife, played a significant role in crafting his image. She encouraged him to pose with a Thompson for photographs, and she spread stories of his supposed ruthlessness. Catherine understood that in the world of gangsters, fear was as powerful as firepower. The nickname stuck, and soon the man behind it was lost beneath the legend. Kelly was not the cold-blooded killer newspapers imagined, but perception has a way of becoming reality. Once the world believed he was Machine Gun Kelly, even he could no longer escape it. The crime that sealed his fate came in July of 1933. Oil magnate Charles Urschel was one of the wealthiest men in Oklahoma City, and that wealth made him a target. On a hot summer evening, Urschel and a houseguest were playing cards when armed intruders burst into the room. The intruders grabbed Urschel, blindfolded him, and whisked him away. For Kelly, it was supposed to be a clean operation. Snatch a wealthy man, collect the ransom, and vanish into safety. But what he underestimated was the steel nerve of his captive. Charles Urschel, though bound and blindfolded, made a decision: if he was to survive, he would not allow fear to blind him. He began paying attention to every detail. He counted the footsteps from one room to another. He listened for the distant hum of airplanes, for crickets at night, for the crowing of roosters at dawn. He noticed the surfaces beneath his feet, the wooden floors, the dirt outside, the cool cement of a cellar. Each clue was filed away in his memory, a map of sensations that would later lead investigators straight to the kidnappers. Meanwhile, the ransom negotiations moved forward. Kelly and his associates demanded $200,000, a fortune at the time, especially in the midst of the Depression. The money was delivered, and for a moment it seemed the plan had succeeded. Urschel was released, unharmed but unshaken, carrying within him the seeds of Kelly's downfall. Enter the FBI. In 1933, the Bureau was still building its reputation under J. Edgar Hoover. The Urschel kidnapping offered Hoover the perfect chance to prove the FBI's strength. Urschel's testimony was remarkable. Despite being blindfolded, he recalled enough details about his captivity to guide investigators to the farm in Paradise, Texas, where he had been held. From there, the trail of evidence began to unfold. Kelly and Catherine went on the run. For weeks, they drifted from city to city, staying ahead of the law but never fully escaping its reach. The newspapers breathlessly covered the chase, amplifying Kelly's image as a master outlaw. But behind the headlines, the truth was less glamorous. He was tired, nervous, and increasingly cornered. The end came in Memphis, Tennessee in September 1933. Federal agents tracked the couple to a modest house. At dawn, they surrounded the property. Kelly, realizing he was trapped, dropped the mask of the fearless gangster. His surrender was not a dramatic gunfight but a plea for mercy. "Don't shoot! G-men! Don't shoot!" he cried. Whether those were his exact words or not, they became immortalized in history. The phrase, "Jeep men," entered the American lexicon, forever tied to the FBI, and Machine Gun Kelly's capture became a symbol of the government's triumph over crime. The trial that followed was swift and decisive. Urschel's testimony was damning, the evidence overwhelming. The courtroom became a stage where the myth unraveled. Kelly and Catherine were both sentenced to life in prison, making them among the first to receive such a penalty under new federal kidnapping laws. The sentence was not just about punishing Kelly. It was a declaration that America would no longer tolerate criminals who believed they were untouchable. Alcatraz became Kelly's new home. On the cold, windswept island in San Francisco Bay, surrounded by waters that few dared to cross, he was just another inmate. Gone was the myth of Machine Gun Kelly, the fearsome gangster. Behind bars, he was George Barnes once more, a man living out his days in routine monotony, a shadow of the figure newspapers had built up. Other prisoners described him as quiet, almost harmless, far from the ruthless image he once carried. The gangster era faded as time marched on. World War II reshaped the nation, new threats emerged, and the names of outlaws like Kelly drifted into history. In 1954, George Barnes died in prison, largely forgotten by the outside world. He was no longer the man who had once captured headlines, but a relic of a bygone age. Yet his story continues to stir curiosity because it blurs the line between legend and truth. Was he truly the criminal mastermind people believe, or was he a man caught in a web of his wife's ambition, bad choices, and a myth that spiraled out of control? In the end, George Machine Gun Kelly was not remembered for his cunning or his strength, but for a single phrase shouted in desperation, "Don't shoot, G-men." It is a story that reminds us of the fragility of reputation, the power of myth, and the way history can elevate an ordinary man into a symbol, only to strip him back down again. His tale lingers not because of the crimes he committed, but because it captures the strange alchemy of fear, media, and human choice that defined America's gangster era.